Welcome to the 2022 Capitol Officials Association Baseball Rules Clinic number 2. I am your host, Greg Stanley. The rules test will be open from February the 7th through February the 24th. You will be allowed unlimited time with 5 breaks allowed. It is an open rulebook test. There are 100 questions. The test can be accessed through Dragonfly. You must score 75 or better to be eligible for regular season games, and must score an 80 or better to be eligible for postseason games. Make sure you keep your blockout dates up to date in Arbiter from now through the end of May. Accept or decline games through Arbiter, and make sure you contact your partner by either email, text, or phone call. Scrimmages will be self-assigned through Arbiter. All umpires will need to be in full uniform with full equipment for all scrimmages. The on-field clinic is scheduled for Saturday, February the 5th at Millbrook High School from 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock. All umpires working less than 4 years with Ron should attend. It's a great opportunity to learn, review, and practice mechanics and positioning. It's also a great opportunity for Ron and other evaluators to see you. Please wear your uniform, gray slacks, black or blue shirt or pullover, and bring your mask for plate and cage work. Game fees this year for middle school and JV games will be $64. For varsity games will be $74.50. And JV varsity doubleheader will be $64 plus $74.50, a total of $138.50. The first contest of the season can start on Monday, February 28th. The last contest can be scheduled for Friday, May the 6th. First round of the playoffs is May the 10th. Second round of the playoffs, May 13th. Third round of the playoffs, May 17th. And fourth round of the playoffs, May 20th. The regional series will take place between May 24th through the 28th, and the state championship series is scheduled for June 3rd and 4th at Burlington and at NC State or Team Park.
All right, the rules that we're going to cover in this presentation will be rule number 3. Please read it in full detail. This is not word for word. This is just skim through what I consider to be the important information that we all understand and can apply to each game. So Rule 3, Section 1, Article 1 states that the player listed as the pitcher shall pitch to the first opposing batter until he is put out or advances to first base. Another part of that, really important, that we apply: projected substitutions are not allowed. Typically comes into play if a coach is going to pinch hit or pinch run for someone and they tell us that the starter will re-enter. That's great. They can tell us that, but that is a projected substitution. We do not necessarily confirm that. I simply just tell the coach, that's great. Just remind me in the middle of the inning when he returns to the field. Article 2, if a pitcher is replaced, the substitute pitcher shall pitch to the current batter or any substitute until that batter is put out, reaches first base, or the third out is made. Now, to fulfill this requirement, the umpire will not allow a defensive conference that will violate this rule. Right? And a removed pitcher may return as pitcher once per inning in Federation. And if a pitcher is removed due to injury, the replacement pitcher is allowed as many warm-ups as necessary. However, if he uses more than 8 pitches, then the replaced pitcher cannot return as pitcher. Rule number 3, Section 1 continued. Article 3, any starter, including DH, may re-enter one time. A substitute, however, who is removed may not re-enter. Article 4 will cover the new DH rule that came in last year and will continue this year. For that DH rule, you can review the State Rules Clinic. Mark goes through a good explanation in the State Rules Clinic. Also check, there is a link on the main page of Ron's Arbiter site that will also give you some good information about the new DH rule. The DH can be a 10th player or any position player can also be listed as DH. If they're using a 10th player, then a 10-man lineup is the traditional way the DH has been. However, if they're using the new DH process, a player DH, then the player DH is considered as two different people. For example, if Smith is listed as the second baseman and the DH, then Smith is considered two different people. Smith, second baseman, defensively, and then Smith, DH, offensively. If a team uses the player DH process, the basic principle behind that is any offensive change to DH will terminate the DH for the remainder of the game. Rule number 3, section 1 continued. Article 4 with the DH rule continued. If a team is using a pitcher DH or catcher DH, then they cannot use a courtesy runner. When a pitcher DH or catcher DH is being used, when on offense, that player is a DH batter. They are no longer considered a pitcher or a catcher. So if a coach attempts to use a courtesy runner, he is actually making a substitution, and that will in fact terminate the DH. We need to be a little proactive in that and help the coach understand what's going on. If he insists on using a runner, then we need to inform him that that becomes a substitution and the role of the DH is terminated. Article 5, any player exhibiting symptoms of a concussion shall be immediately removed from the game and shall not return to play until cleared by an appropriate health care provider. It was determined several years ago that a certified athletic trainer does meet this requirement. So the home team is expected to provide a certified athletic trainer at all events. So if we have a situation where someone potentially has become concussed, then we will have the certified trainer evaluate that player. And if that certified trainer deems them safe and clears them, they can return to play as long as they do not violate any other re-entry rule. If the certified trainer does not clear them to play, they cannot return that day. Article 6, any player who is bleeding shall be prohibited from playing until appropriate treatment is administered. As the umpires, we determine what is a reasonable amount of time for treatment to be administered. We've been advised in past years to consider the 5 to 10 minute mark as a reasonable amount of time for treatment to be administered. If there is blood on the uniform shall be cleaned or replaced. So again, if you see blood on someone's uniform, they have two options. They can try to clean it real quick, probably won't happen, or they can simply change uniforms, whether it's a jersey. If they have to change a pair of pants, then they need to make sure they do that in a safe, secure location, but that can happen. Rule number 3, section 2, article 1. Any coach or player in the coach's box must wear a helmet. This is private school and public schools. Any adult can wear a skull cap helmet. They do not have to have the double ear flap. If it's a non-adult, they must wear a double ear flapped helmet. And if all they have available are the double ear flapped helmets, then the adult would have to wear that as well. Article 2, no coach shall physically assist a runner. All right, the penalty for that, the runner is declared out. The ball remains live, and the result of all other plays stand. Right, Article 4, the head coach must attend the pregame conference. If they do not, then the penalty is that head coach is restricted to the dugout. Now, use common sense with some exceptions there. I've had situations where I've had a plate meeting where the head coach was in traffic on her way for various reasons. So we'll use a little bit of common sense. But if we know the head coach is on site and we see the head coach on site and that head coach does not attend the pregame conference, he is not the head coach for that game. He shall be restricted to the dugout. Rule 3, Section 3, Article 1. All players and coaches must remain in the dugout area during play. We must consistently enforce this rule. They will get away with as much as we let them. So don't let players leak out of the dugout and put buckets outside. All players and coaches and equipment must remain in the dugout area. Players cannot fake a tag without the ball. This is obstruction. Players cannot wear jewelry while playing or bandanas. So jewelry in the dugout, not a problem. As soon as they come into the game, now we have the problem. That's something we need to continue to enforce better. Assistant coaches cannot leave the dugout or coach's box to dispute a judgment call. The penalty for that is the head coach and assistant coach are restricted to the dugout. We need to use a little bit of common sense when it comes to that. If an assistant coach is approaching you about a judgment call, we need to kind of hold our hand up for a stop sign and let him know, Coach, you cannot come argue that call. That is not your job. I will only discuss that with the head coach. The other side of it is if it's a close play at first base, all right, we get the out. First base coach just, Greg, what'd you see on that? And I can have that conversation with him in a civilized manner as long as he's not leaving in an argumentative way. If he's not leaving his coach's box in an argumentative way, I can have a conversation with him. But as soon as it gets to a point where it becomes a potential argument, I will stop him and say, Coach, I'm finished. This is not your argument to have. A player shall not initiate malicious contact. The penalty, immediate dead ball. If the player is on offense, that player is declared out and ejected. The exception to that is if he's already scored, he's already crossed the plate and scored, and then he has malicious contact, he is simply ejected. He is not declared out. If the player is on defense, the player is ejected, and the umpire shall rule safe or out, and then award bases as appropriate, as if the malicious contact did not occur. All right, continuing with Rule 3, Section 3, Article 1, a player shall not call time to cause a balk. So if a batter does something that in your judgment causes the pitcher to stop and possibly balk, then we call time, basically a do-over. But a batter cannot call time or do anything else in an effort to cause a balk. A player shall not use tobacco or tobacco-like products, period. Article 2, a coach who is ejected must leave the vicinity of the playing area immediately, out of sight and sound of the field. One exception to that is if there is an injury and they are allowed to return to the field to address an injury. Article 3, players loosening up to bat must remain in their own deck circle. Particularly private schools and JV games, for whatever reason, they're allowed at some point to go opposite of where the batter is. That is not acceptable. We need to be mindful of that and see that and not let that happen. Article 4, when players, typically pitchers, are warming up in foul territory, another player shall protect them and they must have a glove and preferably wearing a helmet for safety purposes. So pitcher and a catcher goes down into the bullpen. If that bullpen is inside the fence, if it's in playable area, then there must be another person down to protect them, and that person must have a glove and preferably wearing a helmet. Rule number 3, Section 4, Article 1. Each team is allowed 3 defensive charge conferences during a 7-inning game. For extra innings, each team is allowed 1 defensive charge conference per inning. The original conferences do not carry over. After all three conferences are used, the pitcher must be removed with each conference. If we're extra innings, after the one defensive conference is used, then the pitcher must be removed with each conference thereafter. Article 2, each team is allowed one offensive charged conferences per inning. And then Article 3, a defensive charged conference ends when the coach crosses the foul line. Rule 3, Section 4 continued. Article 4, an offensive charged conference ends when the coach initially starts to return to the coach's box or dugout. So make sure you're aware of when does a defensive conference end and when does the offensive conference end. Article 5, when either team has a charged conference, the other team may also have a conference, which is not charged, provided the conference concludes when the opposing team's conference concludes. So if the defensive coach goes to visit the mound, the offensive team can meet, and as long as they do not delay the game, it is not considered a charged conference in high school federation. Right. Important note, we must document all charged conferences and notify coaches of charged conferences, especially defensive conferences. So it's important on our lineup card that we make a note when each team has a charged conference, and we notify a coach if they have been charged with a conference. If a defensive coach is going to check on a pitcher for injury purposes, we walk with them, we stand with them, and it is our job to make sure the conversation is simply about a potential injury. If it gets beyond that, then they are at jeopardy of being charged with a conference. Likewise with any defensive player. If an outfielder potentially gets injured, the coach can go talk to the outfielder. We need to be there at that conference with the coach and the player and make sure it is only about a potential injury. Right. Rule number 4, Section 1. Article 1. The home team decides if conditions are suitable to start the game, but we should offer our input. If it's potential bad conditions, we need to be there early enough to kind of walk around, get a feel of what the field looks like, feels like, and will play like. And if we think that it's going to be unsafe, we can offer input to that coach to tell them it's not worth starting, or these are some places on the field that need to be addressed in order for us to be able to play. After the game starts, the umpires determine if conditions are suitable to continue to play. At that point, coaches no longer have input. It's the sole decision of the umpires. Article 2, the home team determines ground rules. But really important, a ground rule cannot supersede the rule book. So we need to know what is written in the rule book and make sure that a ground rule that a coach proposes does not supersede a rule book rule. Article 3, at the plate meeting, the home team will give the plate umpire their lineup, followed by the visiting team. So as the plate umpire, we should always receive the home team lineup first, then receive the visiting team lineup second. Each lineup shall list a minimum of 9 players to start. We cannot start with less than 9 players. Note, we will discuss a pregame plate meeting conference in a later video. Rule number 4, Section 2, Article 1. We are playing 7-inning games unless teams mutually agree to play 5 innings, a doubleheader. If varsity teams are playing the same 2 teams and they agree to play 2 5-inning games, then that is acceptable. Or if the conference rule has a JV game time limit. So if it's a JV varsity doubleheader, and most of our conferences do have this, if they determine that a JV game has a certain time limit, then we stop at that time limit. Article 2, we do in fact apply the 10-run mercy rule. Article 4, suspended game policy. If after 4.5 innings a winner can be determined, then the game is over. If not, then the game will be suspended and picked up at the point of interruption if that game is to be continued. Rule number 4, section 4, article 1. A game shall be forfeited to the offended team by the umpire when a team is unable to provide 9 players to start or 8 players to finish. So if they don't have 9 players, we don't start. If they cannot continue with at least 8 players, then the game is over and recorded as a forfeit.
In closing, please complete the attestation form at the link in the description box. Thank you guys for watching this video.